Midnight in Amber, Skullduggery Chapter 4. Lark felt very warm and secure when she woke up. There was a sense of comfort that she was unaccustomed to, and she supposed that alien feeling was what woke her. Her whole back, from shoulder to thighs, was stiff and aching. Every inch of muscle was tightly clenched. Her throat felt dry and sore, her head a bit heavy. Something under her moved. She opened her eyes, realized why she felt so warm and comfortable, and smiled. "Good morning, Princess," he said. She stretched, trying to relieve some of her stiffness. "Is morning?" she asked hoarsely. "Probably not." She directed a question at her familiar and rolled her eyes at his response. "It's always supper time," she chuckled. "Says it's evening." "How are you feeling?" he asked, rubbing her back. "Stiff, sore, thirsty." "Would you like some water?" he asked, getting up. "Ça va." He got up and went into the front room for the other pitcher. Lark felt something warm and furry brush against her feet and lifted the covers. Scraps grinned up at her, trotted over to say hello and beg for attention. Landros brought her a cup of water and helped her to sit up to drink it. "I see someone has made himself comfortable," he commented dryly. Outed, the raccoon wandered off the bed and disappeared. Landros set the cup aside when she finished and settled on the bed again, his back against the headboard, holding her. "Eleonora," he began, burning to have his questions answered, but not certain it was the right time to ask them. "Yes?" she asked, snuggling up to him when he did not continue. "Do you want something to eat?" She shook her head minutely. "Not now." He tenderly brushed loose strands from her face. Lark realized something was very different about her hair. She did not feel its weight and warmth flowing over her shoulders and back. She ran her hand along the back of her head, feeling for the length of it, and found the braid, pulled it around so that she could see it. "What is the matter?" he asked, noting her confusion. "Never worn hair like this. Feels strange." "I suppose it keeps it from getting tangled while they work," he muttered. "Lark," he began again. She looked up into his troubled eyes. "What?" she asked softly. "What is wrong?" "I hate to ask, but I have to." He stroked her cheek softly. "If you are up to it." "Up to what?" "Telling me what happened?" She laid her head down on his chest and clung tightly to him. He rubbed her arm, held her tightly. "Hey, you don't have to tell me now if you can't. But I do eventually have to know." She sighed and stared blindly into the fire, trying to put into words somehow without running it visually through her mind, to be detached enough not to panic or anger him. "Went to dressmaker's today. Leaving there, fireball come. I stopped to help with house on fire, made rain. Ran into old friend after, and we walked. There was Northman, badly wounded and stinking of spent magic, begging anyone who would listen for help, promising money, whatever we wanted if we would help his friends. He muttered on about ambush and men like maddened devils, that they had his brothers. No one would listen. We said we would go, and he led us down alley to warehouse. There was man there, I think. Could have been woman, hard to tell, wore hood and gloves. Even by voice was not certain of gender." Landros stiffened, felt a chill in the room in spite of the fire. How could they have moved so quickly? Had this warehouse been a secondary site? Did they switch back and forth, or even to a third location to keep from being observed, followed, or ambushed? Hood offered us opportunity to help him. When we refused, he ordered us killed. Said something about, "Get right this time." That was when sent Nightingale to find you. I think this might have been how Ashanda and other missing were killed, she added, looking up at him. Is making sense? He nodded. "I know that already. Go on." She sighed. "We were surrounded, had only dagger, and without sword am little good in fight. Was too close to cast effective, so slipped into shadows. Threw pendant into fight to give friends light and me shadows to hide in. No sooner I call up poltergeist, but I felt them ripped from my control. That was when I felt dagger, I think, in back. I turned, saw Hood behind me, controlling my poltergeists, attacking me with them. I could see fight going badly for others, but could not help. Can only guess what they must think of me, fleeing fight, think I abandoned. I needed to get away from fight, to have room to use magic. She choked back the tears threatening her, refusing to allow them voice. She could explain to them what happened, what she was trying to do, when she was well enough to see them. She continued, I felt something, a lot of somethings, hit me from behind, and that was the last thing I remember. Lark felt his heart tighten uncontrollably. Did not want to have to tell her, but there was no way around it. She would not thank him for lying to her. Lark, I need to know who those people with you were. She thought about that before she said anything. Why would he have to ask her? Why wait until she was healed and woken up if all he had to do was ask them? Unless he could not ask them. She sat up, not caring how much it hurt, and looked at him, trying to find the answers to her fears in his amber eyes. She found them. I am only one? She stammered, feeling her blood go cold. Landra sat up, held her tightly as her arms began to tremble, unable or unwilling to hold her own weight. Lark was in complete shock, unable to breathe, to think. Landros knew survivor's guilt, knew that it was what she had to be feeling. She drew a sudden, ragged breath. Nightingale hopped off the bedpost onto her knee and piped his concern. She took a deep, slow breath, getting herself under control, stroked the bird's breast feathers softly. He rubbed his tiny head against her finger and made a sad little noise. Man was Sebastian's shadow folk, she said, without looking up at him. Was with Keltri Ruanai on Evander. Killed vampire. Well, body at least. Woman was named Lulelani, was friend of Sebastian. Only met her a few minutes before, was with him. I think Keltri knew her, or she knew Keltri. Might ask him. What about the other man? He asked softly. She looked up. What other? Oh, him. Him I did not know. When Vashinti, or whatever her name was, came to us and began leading us away, this man came up. Thought perhaps black-skinned man was trouble for us. He looked fright. Asked if it was trouble. Lulelani tell him yes, and would he like to help? So he came with us to die. Never told us his name. There was no time. Damn it, he swore, banging his head against the headboard in frustration. What is, she asked, brushing his cheek with the back of her hand, what is so important about this man's name? He was a falcon, he breathed. A full knight. That is what is so important about his name. I have to report his death, and I do not even know who to say has died. Lark winced as she pulled her sore muscles, trying to sit up to comfort him. Lot of people have died in the last few days. A lot more will die, and many nameless. We cannot save them all. You cannot save them all. He took her hands from his face and held them in his own. I'm upsetting you, he moaned. You need to rest. I have things I have to do. He started to get out of the bed. What, now? Is nightfall, she protested, grabbing hold of his left shoulder to hold him back. She pulled back with a squeal when he flinched, giving a low shout. He stood, turned to face her, holding his arm and trying to get his pain under control. She grabbed his open shirt front and pulled it back far enough to see the bandage on his shoulder. Are wounded, she gasped. How? Rescuing me? No, she thought, not more blood on my head. No, he groaned. Remember last night I told you I had some things to do? That I was close to finding out what was going on and why so many freelance adventurers had disappeared? I remember conversation, she nodded. Well, I got into it this morning. The black-skinned man, that Northman with the torn-up face you met? That was Vanishti, a one-time companion of Ashanda. And the cut on his face was my doing. It turns out he betrayed Ashanda and sold her out for his own life. These men have been luring freelancers in and then petitioning them with promises of money, glory, whatever it takes to get them to turn coat. If they refuse, they die. There's no telling how many have taken the promises offered. He began to pace. Maybe I should have accepted, he muttered, gotten myself in and used that to discover who they had corrupted and how deep they had gone. Maybe found out just what the enemy is up to. We turned them down and they nearly killed us. If Adric hadn't teleported us out. Adric teleport? She asked, incredulous. Did not know Adric could. Apparently neither did he mused. He prayed for a miracle, and, well, he got one. I took a shoulder hit. Adric took some minor damage. Beric nearly lost his arm, and I don't think Lithgoran was too severely hurt, which is more than I can say for his brother. Lith has brother? Not anymore, he sighed, sitting down on the edge of the bed. He buried his face in his hands. There has been so much blood lost already. If Adric had not been so divinely inspired, there might have been no one to come to your rescue, Princess. They outnumbered us 2-1 easily. How many men were there who attacked you? She rested her chin on his good shoulder and wrapped her arms around him from behind. 5 or 6, maybe more. I was a little busy. Yeah, he snorted angrily, busy getting stabbed in the back. He covered her hands with his, relishing the feel of her so close, so caring. Something has to give, Ilyana. Somewhere the storm is going to break. I only hope that whatever is keeping the king does not keep him long, or there may not be a city left to save. What do you suppose is keeping him? She asked. The goddess only knows. It would have to be serious, I'm sure. Maybe another army? I don't know. With no news coming in, the whole country could be at war for all that we know. Lark pulled him backward, laid him across her lap, and brushed his hair from his eyes. Then what does any of this matter? She asked. All we have is now. What will be no matter what we do. And war, king, yes, even your precious Lord Colwyn can wait for sunrise. You need your rest, and I'm not willing to let you go. At least not for a few more hours. Landros sighed, closed his eyes, and savored the soft stroking of her cool hands on his brow. It was so easy to just fall into her embrace and get lost there forever. I really should head over to... Lark bent forward and pressed a soft kiss to his lips, inadvertently pressing her breasts against his forehead, smothering him in her musky warmth. He gave a quiet moan. Maybe I do hurt too much just now, he mumbled, reaching up to deepen the kiss. She stiffened suddenly, held her breath. He let go and immediately slid out from under her. What's wrong? She let her breath out slowly, took another deep breath, and repeated the process. She shook her head. Just sore. Getting stiff, she said. It was more than that, but there was no sense in worrying him. It would pass. Even now she could feel the spasm letting go, her muscles relaxing a little. I'm fine, she said, sitting up straight, smiling intentionally. Do you think you could eat something now? He asked her, kissing her fingers. Maybe a little bit. Nothing heavy. Would make sick, she groaned. He kissed her fingers again. I'll be right back, he said. He fetched the magic blanket from its cabinet and spread it on the floor in front of the fire. Scraps ran over and sat just off the blanket, watching eagerly, rubbing his paws together as he waited. Landros concentrated on the kind of food he wanted and spoke the command word. A large bowl of rich broth appeared, with a loaf of still steaming bread and a large chunk of sharp cheese. There was a pitcher of mulled wine and a bowl of crawfish and apples. Landros was somewhat startled. When a pair of black paws snaked out and seized the nearest crawfish, he was even more so. What? Lark giggled from the bed. You look surprised. I did not ask for crawfish. Or apples, he answered, watching the raccoon run into a warm corner with his prize. You think maybe he did? She laughed. I said before, I do not understand the magic completely, he said, shaking his head. He got up and began carrying the food to the small table by the bed, dragging the chair over beside it. Lark sat on her knees with the sheet draped over her lap and accepted the mug of broth that he poured for her. The two of them ate quietly and shared the meager bounty with the animals. Lark laughed softly as she watched the raccoon holding his apple up for the bird to pick the seeds out. She watched Landros watch the animals, lovingly mesmerizing his face, his expression. He seemed at peace right now. Ironic, she thought, that it takes nearly killing him to get him to unwind. She gasped as her back suddenly seized up, every muscle tightening. Landros turned his head sharply to look at her and felt a pull from his shoulder as he did. What, Princess, are you all right? He asked, tossing the heel of his bread on the table and grabbing hold of her to keep her from tumbling forward off of the bed. She let her breath out slowly, unfolded herself, and laid down. She pulled the pillow down to her instead of crawling up to it, digging her claws into it. "Hurts," she mumbled into the feather pillow. "So tight," she gasped. Next to him, on the table, he heard the dull clatter and turned to see the bird sitting with one claw on the overturned bottle of medicine that Brother Farron had left for them. He looked back at Lark and took her hand in his. "I think we both could use some of that," he admitted reluctantly. He picked up the bottle, made a face as he uncorked it. He hated this sort of thing, medicinal herbs, the drugs which fuddled the mind, but he could not stand to see her in so much pain, and the priest had left it here in belief that it would be needed. He poured a few measured drops of it into half a mug of the wine and helped her to sit up enough to drink it. "Come on," he said. "It will help with the pain. Help you relax." She drank it slowly, laid back down. He set the cup back on the table. "It might take a few minutes to work," he said, hating as well this feeling of helplessness. She barely nodded. "If, like laudanum, will not take but a moment," she wheezed. For lack of anything else to do, he began to wrap the remains of the bread and the cheese in a cloth for later, put the empty bowl of broth back onto the blanket, and banished it. He shook it out and put it away. He checked on Lark again. She was still tense, clenched almost into a complete ball, breathing spastically. "You have to let go," he said, "if you want the muscles to relax." "Is not me," she gasped. "Is muscle not relax." He sighed and thought for a moment. Then he remembered something, had an idea that might help her. He went into the water closet, opening the small cabinet where the towels and soaps were kept, looking for a bottle he remembered having seen there, something his brother had left. He found it, pushed towards the back, lying forgotten on its side. He brought the bottle into the bedroom, setting it on the hearth to warm up. He came over to the bed, pulled back the covers, and laid a large towel down beside her. "Come on," he said, helping her over onto the towel. "On your belly." "What? Why?" she moaned, not helping, but not resisting either. He began to pull her shift up, trying to get it off over her head. "Lover, it's not time for—" she protested. Her muscles were tightening up further, reacting to the pain, making it worse. "Relax, my princess. It is not what you think." He stopped for a moment and looked into her dark eyes. "Trust me," he said softly, managed to get her on the towel, undressed, and returned to the hearth for the bottle. He opened it, and pouring the warmed oil onto his hand, he set it on the bedstand. Rubbing his hands together to further heat it, he climbed up onto the bed, straddling her hips, and began to massage the oil into her shoulders in long, slow, deep strokes. She gave a sudden, shuddering moan that had nothing to do with pain, and slowly began to relax. He worked his way down her back, trying to conserve his strength, to be gentle on her as well as himself. The oil made it much easier on both of them, letting his hands glide across her muscles without having to exert too much pressure, which might have done more damage than good. She could feel the knots beginning to release as he rubbed, the muscles to stop complaining so loudly. The oil smelled strongly of juniper and wintergreen, and she began to feel a cool burn across her shoulders where the oil was drying. "What is this?" she moaned, surrendering completely to his ministrations. "It's something my brother left here once. Something he swears by for getting a woman relaxed and... well..." He felt his face beginning to flush. "Ready," he finished. "I thought it would help the tightness, ease the pain." "I'm not hurting you, am I?" he asked. "No," she murmured. He had his doubts, though. She was moaning an awful lot. He moved back as he rubbed, working his way slowly down to her thighs. There were small red spots all over her, evidence of where the nails had been, though the wounds had closed. By tomorrow he knew the marks would be gone. In the middle of her back, just under her left shoulder blade, was a thin red line, no more than 1 inch or 2 long, a blade mark. Judging from its placement, the assassin knew the human body, knew what he was doing, and where to place a blade to keep the victim from screaming. He should have hit her lung, but there was a chance that Lark had moved just in time, that the blade had slid in sideways, missing the intended target. He finished the massage without being as thorough as he would have liked. His shoulder was beginning to ache again. He leaned forward and kissed her cheek softly. She was already asleep. He got off of her and the bed, drew the covers up over her. He stopped at mid-back, examining the small knife scar before covering her up completely. He stood up and mimed stabbing her there. From what he remembered, the hooded figure was a little bit taller than himself, and therefore taller than Lark, so it had to be an upward stab. It felt awkward making a right-handed strike to her left blade. Felt more natural and therefore more likely to go right with a right-handed attack. So the hooded person was left-handed. That made things a little easier. Not many people were. Well, it was a start, he thought. He checked on her again, made certain she was warm enough and sleeping soundly. He was restless himself, not ready to go back to bed. He figured she would probably sleep until morning, which meant he had time, if he felt up to it, to go to Colwyn's and make his report. He only thought twice about it before he shrugged off his nightshirt and pulled clean clothes on. Scraps climbed up onto the bed, sat up, and called attention to himself. Landers looked up at him as he tucked his shirt in. "Yes, I am going out. Now, are you going to stay here tonight and keep an eye on her?" he asked in a low voice, indicating the sleeping girl. "Or do you want to go with me to Colwyn's and scruff around in the woods?" The raccoon gave a soft chirr and crawled under the blankets. "Fine," he sighed. "Suit yourself. I swear you're as bad as Porthalus about a beautiful woman." He put his cloak on and paused to have a word with the mockingbird. "I don't know how much you understand," he said softly, "but I want you to keep an eye on her. If anything happens, or she needs anything, go down to the kitchen and someone will come up. If it is an emergency, I will be at Colwyn's where the wagon is. You can find me there." He stroked the soft breast of the bird. "I just hope you understand enough," he sighed, and left the room quietly.